Thank you very much indeed, John, for a paper, a presentation which gave us enormous amounts of data, but also enormous challenges. And certainly his focus on the emerging paradigm, as he called it, I think is something that we all need to think about very seriously as we try to work out how to deliver, if you like, an internationalization which is comprehensive or ubiquitous or pervasive or whatever, with particularly the focus on outcomes. What I'd like to do to start with is to ask each of the panelists in turn. I'll just go along from the far left, starting with Michael Hoey. I'm just asking you all just to say, to what extent do you share John's views on comprehensive internationalization? Michael.
Well, I do share those views. I think John is one of the great theorists of internationalization, and I think that the views he expresses represent something a bit like the Sermon on the Mount. They are a wonderful picture of how humans might be and how universities might be, and almost impossible to achieve. So I think what we need to do is recognize that the kind of range of factors he was picking up on are factors which all of us have to take very much into account. But recognize also that each institution is going to be on a journey to achieve the kind of total integration of internationalization into everything that we do. That journey is quite a long one to take. But I think it's worth just quickly saying that education is a follower here, not a leader. That the world has internationalized quite some way back. Ordinary citizens around the world watch American films, they watch European football, they buy French perfume, they drink German-style lager, and they watch news like the terrible news we've been seeing today about Japan. The world is internationalized, and if you look at that internationalization, it's a mixture of good things and bad things. Some features of those are neutral, quite a lot of them are. Some of them are very good, like the news. Some are particularly bad, like cocaine traffic. And actually what we're doing is, in internationalizing universities, we have to recognize that internationalization isn't inherently a good. It's only a good if we are absolutely clear about what our motives are for doing it. And the motives seem to me to be twofold. First of all, we need to put research at the very center. Many of the issues the world faces are truly global, and even if they're not, even local issues have a global dimension, and we need to put international research at the center of what we're doing. And the other center, if you can have two centers, is we need to make sure that we focus on the student and don't just treat the student as a unit to be manipulated, moved around in a big circuit of student exchanges and student involvement. What we have to do is ensure that whatever we do meets the needs of students, and student needs differ around the world, and therefore the ways in which John's vision of internationalization will pan out are going to be different around the world according to the different student needs in different parts of the globe. And I think if we don't have that, we have the capacity of having, at very best, a neutral value to what we're doing, and at worst, actually a damaging effect. So I would say I fully support the internationalization image and vision that John has, but we do need to take care that we center on research and on the student need, and without those, we shouldn't be doing it.
Thanks. Eva.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and I'd like to first start by saying thank you to the British Council for inviting me to be part of this distinguished panel. I think you're going to get somewhat bored because we're all going to be very supportive of what John has said. When he spoke about comprehensive internationalization, the image I got in this environment was a Rolls-Royce driving down a 5-lane highway and everything ticking the way it should. That is, I think, a comprehensive internationalization. Yet we all know that that is not the way internationalization is necessarily taking place in the various contexts and in the various institutions. But I think re-examining what we mean by internationalization is very timely. It's timely now, and it's timely on an ongoing basis because it is a dynamic process. It's changing a great deal. If we look at history, just a very short history, it has been a policy instrument for aid, It has been a policy instrument for trade. It is today a policy instrument for reputation and for prestige seeking, and for securing both national and institutional competitive advantage and competitiveness. And quite often on our institutional campuses, it is all of that at once. I think what we need to be certain about is that we see it as that instrument, not an end in itself. Internationalization is a way to get somewhere else. And for that reason, we need to be very clear about what the goals are that we are pursuing. I go back to, I think, what has just been said. What are the intended goals we're pursuing? What are the actions that we're undertaking, and how are they related to those goals? What are the rationales that we are adopting, and what are the approaches? Because I think that the notion of a comprehensive internationalization means that there should be coherence among these, and often there isn't. So one of the things that I think we need to make certain is that we reposition internationalization as a way to improve the quality of higher education, institution-wide, embedded deeply into everything we do, as John has said. It is a way to transform the experience for students and to transform the way, as institutions, we serve our local society as well as our more global context. I think it is being mainstreamed into most institutional policy making, and for that reason, it is extremely important that we are coherent in how internationalization allows us to pursue institutional goals.
Thank you, Eva. Michael, continuing the consensus?
Yes, I'm afraid so. I think it was a very comprehensive analysis, which we would fully agree with. In Hong Kong, we've recently conducted a higher education, a post-secondary education review, where we focused on a number of issues which I think are common to many countries around the world. The system level, that we believe that governments need to treat the whole of post-secondary education, and I'll come back to that in relation to higher education, as one interlocking system. That means role differentiation is important. The issues of the balance between private and public sector provision, access opportunities, articulation opportunities, the question of quality assurance, and internationalization. And internationalization is one of the big themes in our review. We believe it is essential, particularly for the university sector, for the very reasons that have been described, and also that it must flow through the full gamut of institutional activity. Just to pick up on a couple of points, since be somewhat provocative, I wonder whether some of your comments were perhaps a bit too utilitarian. And I think it's clear that countries are at different stages of development of their higher education systems, and that perhaps the Western world is in deep doo-doo, to borrow President Bush's phrase, and needing to cut back. But they're cutting back from a relatively high base in terms of capacity and internationalization, whereas many parts of the world, I think, are just beginning that journey and expanding tremendously. So this may, in fact, help internationalization, if I can put it that way. There's also the question that I think has been discussed earlier of the length of degrees, 2, 3, and 4-year degrees, and what is best for the students and what is best for the economy. But also role differentiation, and whether this internationalization needs to or can apply across the whole of the post-secondary sector. The title of this is Higher Education. I'm not sure that all of us have a clear idea of exactly what higher education means, but I think clearly it is not possible for this type of internationalization as described to go through the whole of post-secondary schooling. So there needs to be role differentiation. There needs to be thought as to which institutions in your system can engage in this and to what extent. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned it?
Yeah. I think comprehensive internationalization is a very interesting concept. And when I first look at the CEI, one word comes from my mind, that is Confucian institution. That's another kind of internationalization. And I want to add another point. I think John has convinced us with several rationale why we need internationalization. But I think it's time to rethink of the value, the function, and the education model for the university at this moment, because the telecommunication and the transportation technology has changed the way of learning, the way of living. So it's easy to imagine students can stay their home to reach the international education resources. Why university campus exists? So I think it's time to rethink about the international, besides the internationalization, to rethink about the values, the functions, the education model, and the learning behavior, teaching methodology for the students. And according to following this line, our university is a new university. The name is difficult to remember, but it's, in another aspect, it's easy because we are created by two universities. One is Xi'an Jiaotong University, another is UK University of Liverpool. So our university's name is Xi'an Jiaotong Liverpool University. I don't want to promote XJTIU. I think I was invited to be here because XJTIU is the first international cooperative university in China started with science and engineering and management. According to my practice in XJTIU, I think I need to mention 3 points. First is mobility. I think John has mentioned the mobility of students is one important way for internationalization. But I think resources mobility and the institutional mobility is possible. For example, XJTU is institutional ability. So we import the education curriculum, education methods from UK and from other world. So I think that's one point. The second point is that it's not to use internationalization to copy the advanced education methodology or way. I think it's time to create something new. So our vision is, according to future demands, to blend Western practice, best practice, and the Eastern best practice to create a new education model. That's the second part. The third one is internationalization will face a lot of challenges, a lot of barriers or obstacles from our experience. For example, political issues, because our students will get 2 dual degrees, so we need to follow 2 set of requirements, UK and Chinese, and the culture and the habits, learning habits. For example, Chinese students are always used to learning passively. It's difficult to change them from passive to active. So I think that's the third thing. There are a lot of obstacles or barriers we need to